Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. Before we dive into things here, I just want to say that this is one of those episodes where I struggled with the title of the episode for too long. And I finally reached out to our Facebook group. If you're not already a member of our Facebook group, head on over to theconnectedyogateacher.com and you can see the join button right on our homepage. Thank you so much to the yoga teachers who reached out in the group to let me know what your thoughts were on the title. It is so tricky because we generally keep the title as short as possible. This was the longest one yet because there's a lot in this conversation. And I'm super grateful that you're here for this conversation because we talk to people over and over again about the importance of self-care. And we know it as yoga teachers. We know that we need self-care in our own lives. And also right now we are witnessing what it looks like if this individualistic self-care is taking precedence over collective care. And so that is why I'm so grateful that you get to hear from Muna today on this conversation. Before I get into this further, let me introduce myself and the podcast in case you're new here. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I use she, her pronouns. And this podcast is being recorded on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people who were here on Turtle Island long before my settler ancestors arrived. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I am very committed to learning and unlearning ways to connect with the earth and the people who've cared for this land for generations. And I'm also excited that I'm on this journey to learn about my ancestors who had earth-based practices. I'm a Canadian yoga teacher, a mom of 3, entrepreneur, and a forever student who probably asks too many questions. Is there such a thing though, really? That's why podcasting feels like a good fit. I like that we get to hang out together and you get to do the things that you're doing, being busy on the go, and you can listen in on a conversation where I ask a lot of questions. Oftentimes, these questions are really inspired by emails and messages that I get from yoga teachers. So thank you if you've ever reached out and sent an email or made a comment somewhere. Those stick with me, and oftentimes they become podcast episodes. And that's the purpose of the podcast. It was made for you, the yoga teacher, because I understand how it feels to leave yoga teacher training and be feeling like you're all alone figuring things out. And so I wanted yoga teachers to have a place where they could connect to a supportive community, to ideas and information, and to really feel like you're not in this all on your own. There is a community of yoga teachers cheering you on. Returning listeners, I'm so grateful that you're here again. Thank you for hanging out. And I also want to say thank you to our sponsor, OfferingTree. I use and love this software in my own business because it automates everything from bookings, payments, Zoom links, reminders, and so much more. And we have a special podcast listener discount code for you if you're deciding, okay, I need help with these things in my business. Head on over to OfferingTree.com/Shannon. Today's episode is also brought to you by Pelvic Health Professionals. And I have a big update to share about pelvic health professionals, and I'll wait until the end of today's episode to talk more in depth. But the quick update is that I'm still in conversations with about 8 individuals who are interested in keeping pelvic health professionals going. So you can still jump in there and learn the most up-to-date pelvic health information. And then as of August the 1st, either I'm passing the torch on, which is what I'm hoping for, leaning for, and thinking is going to happen, or I'm closing pelvic health professionals as we know it. And this wasn't an easy decision because I love talking about pelvic health and connecting with other people who also love this topic. But even louder lately in the last year or two is my desire to grow organic veggies, pollinator-friendly plants, and be more connected to the earth and help others be more connected as well. So something had to go off my plate, and it wasn't the podcast. We're going to be here on the podcast still. But when I really sat with things, I thought, okay, pelvic health professionals has so much potential to become even more if someone put the time into it. Yeah, so I guess I wanted to share, in case you are in a place where you're pivoting. I'll chat about that later in today's episode of some of the things I've learned lately. But also, if you want to jump into pelvic health professionals and learn with us, you have another whole month and hopefully beyond that as well. You can head on over to pelvichealthprofessionals.com and sign up or check it out. Now, let's get right into today's interview with Muna, who's going to be talking with us about how she shifted from learning all about self-care to really looking at collective care, especially now as a Palestinian with family back in the West Bank. So for months now, we've been witnessing the massacre and ongoing genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. And that's not the only major conflict taking place this year. So Genocide Watch has recorded 12 genocide emergencies and 5 additional genocide warnings around the world. And in the midst of all of this, there are many people, especially in the yoga world, who still refuse to speak up, choosing instead to prioritize their own safety or comfort over the need for freedom and liberation for all oppressed people. And I guess it's been really confusing for me. I don't know how it feels for you. I'm hearing from many teachers who also feel really baffled by it or confused by it. And at times I've thought, like, how the heck did we get here? And how do we work together collectively to make things better? And this rides on my mind a lot. And one of the voices that really brings me comfort is when I listened to Muna Shakour, and I found her account on Instagram. She's here with us on the podcast today. As I said, she's a Palestinian with family in the West Bank, so she really understands the area of occupied Palestine. She understands also the health and wellness world. And at one point, she worked as a personal development coach, and then she will tell you she accidentally turned into an activist after the events in Gaza started. Her coaching practice has evolved over the years. So she started out as a parenting coach for parents of children 8 years and younger. And then most recently, she was coaching small business owners and coaches on how to grow their business and personal brands online. And she also was offering corporate training focused on self-reflection and developing soft skills for leadership. Now, since October the 7th, Muna has been actively speaking out against the atrocities happening in Gaza and Palestine, sharing information and drawing attention to the situation there. In today's episode, you're going to hear Muna talk about her work before October the 7th and how she gets nervous about talking about her quote-unquote work now. She highlights the relationship we have with all people, the earth, and all creatures, and why we need to focus on caring for the collective we instead of focusing solely on self-care for me. Muna shares very honestly about the emotions that she's experiencing and how that influences her decisions and who to connect with, who to hire, and where to put her money and who to support. She also offers some suggestions on how to navigate working for a company that won't allow you to speak up and how to continue running your online business alongside speaking up for peace and justice. I am incredibly grateful to Muna for taking the time to speak with us on the podcast and really dive in and talk about the harm that happens when we have this me first approach happening, and also when there is just a deafening silence during a time when we as a collective really need to work together. We have a lot to learn from Muna, so let's dive in and get into today's episode. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast, Muna. It is such an honor to have you here today.
I'm so honored to be here. It's so nice to see your face and talk to you live after all of our conversations on Instagram.
Thank you so much for the work that you're doing on Instagram. Like, I feel like when you post a story, I'm like, yes. So often I feel like I'm seen and heard. And I'm excited that we get to talk about something that's very connected to the yoga world. So, we hear this like take care of yourself, but also we're all connected. There's this message of like, how do we find this balance of like self-care and working on ourselves, but also taking care of each other? Before we get into that though, tell our listeners what's the work that you do and who do you do it for?
If you had asked me what the work I do is 7 months ago, I'd have a completely different answer because I'm a coach turned accidentally activist right now. So I'll just give you a bit of a background on my career. So for 15 years, I worked in the corporate world in communications and marketing with different companies around the world. And then in 2017, I discovered the world of spirituality and coaching and personal development. So it came at a time when I was struggling with postpartum depression after having my daughter. And I was looking for answers for how to feel better. And initially, I started my journey into healing with a psychologist um, who decided that the best course of action was to take antidepressants. And I listened. I didn't know any better at the time. And I always say that that period in my life, that phase of taking the medication for about 3.5 months, I don't regret that per se, because I feel like I was in such a deep darkness, such fog. And when I took the pills, that fog started lifting. And that allowed me to do my research and to start looking for other ways to feel better because I didn't want to be on a pill for the rest of my life. So that's how I started discovering more and more the world of personal development. So, just a step back, at university, I studied communications with a minor in psychology. So, I've always been interested in human behavior and the psychology and our childhoods and all of these things, but it was only an interest. So, then I started my journey of learning about coaching while being coached, and I fell in love with that world. And so I quit my job and I started my own company. I called it Inside Out with Muna, and that's the company that I've been running for the past seven years. And it's had so many different evolutions, from personal development in general to focusing and honing in on peaceful parenting and conscious parenting. So working with parents of children 7 years and younger on how to build a conscious relationship, a relationship where cooperation is what you use instead of control. Because I believe if we want to make this world a better place, that's where it starts with the children. So I did that for a few years, and then some of the moms that I was working with started asking me about how I was growing my business, how I was getting my clients, and I found that I loved teaching them that. So I pivoted into coaching coaches and working on growing their businesses and becoming more clear with their messages and things like that. So that's literally where I was up until October of 2023. And then October 7th happened, and obviously, that's not where things started for me, but that was a day that we will never forget because we knew as Palestinians, I swear to God, I remember that feeling that I felt that morning of knowing that how Israel is going to respond is going to be disastrous. But I swear, not even in my wildest dreams did I imagine that things would get to where they are right now. But anyway, I digress. So for the first week, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to focus on this now. I have to talk about Palestine and then I'll come back to my business. And then the second week, I'm like, I can't. And the third week, and so initially it wasn't a decision. I don't think it has been a decision until now. I just cannot imagine and could not bring myself to talk about anything else just because of how I was feeling. I was basically just doing the basic necessities in life to take care of my home and my child and my husband, but I couldn't think about work. And I thought that by posting about Palestine, where I had never been political on my platform ever, and it took me years and years to get to 8,000 followers, I thought that I'm going to lose some followers. And I said, you know what? I don't care. If I lose followers over this, I don't want these people in my life or in my energy sphere. But to my surprise, the opposite happened. Initially, I did lose a couple of thousand very quickly. But then, just as quickly, people started coming in. And I thought, yeah, it's all the other Palestinians and the Arabs who agree with what I'm saying. That's useless. And then I started receiving messages from people literally all over the world. Like I get goosebumps just thinking about it when I receive messages from a woman who's 67 years old, who's from Norway, who is apologizing to me and saying, I can't believe that I lived my life all of these years believing that the Palestinians are the terrorists. And thank you so much for opening my eyes. And I'm like, oh, wow, it's not just the Palestinians here. And then this woman from Australia and this man from Jamaica and you and how we connected. And I realized that the Palestinian voices, we are around, and maybe for me at least, I'll speak for myself. I thought that people weren't ready to hear this, or that I need to tone it down. I need to be politically correct. I need to color within the lines to be able to fit in. And it was only when I said literally like, screw it, I don't care about this business. I'll burn it all down to the ground. I need to talk about this. That's when I feel like that's when I resonated so much more with people. Um, I'm going into different topics, but because what we talked about before we started recording is about like the growth and the learning that has happened all of these years for me. Like all of the failures that I had with Inside Out with Muna, like trying so hard to get to the first 1,000 and then going live and like one person showing up and it's my mom or my sister and all of these things, and like not being able to speak and recording the same video 10 times before posting it, it now makes sense to me. And yeah, that was practice. I was building up to this because this feels like what I'm meant to be talking about right now. So the question that you asked, I know it was a very short question and I gave you a very long answer, but this question now makes me feel nervous because according to the norms and society, I'm not doing anything. Like, how's your business going? Well, it's not. My business has stopped basically. I'm not coaching people right now because I'm focused on educating and hopefully, it's not just an awakening about Palestine. I'm having my own spiritual awakening and I'm bringing people along the journey with me as I discover it. So this question now makes me feel uncomfortable because I can't just say, oh, work is great. I'm doing so well. And by the way, I've made that much money and I have all of these amazing clients. I don't have that. I don't have that to say. And but no regrets. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Gosh, I appreciate this so much. So much of your story I resonate with. I had postpartum depression after the birth of my first baby. I,
Yeah.
like you, turned to so many spiritual books and was just like, this is where the answer is. And I followed, you and I were having this discussion before we hit record that we both followed so many spiritual teachers, coaches. I I then started coaching yoga teachers because yoga teachers started asking me. So I feel like I built my business, and then people saw how I built my business. I made many mistakes like you, I still do all the time, in like creating live videos or speaking up or like talking about things online that, here's how to record your first, or here's how to jump on Zoom when,
Yeah.
2020 hit and everyone was trying to figure that out. Things that feel, what does that matter? But and I appreciate so much that you said, now in society's view, you're not actually doing work, which is not true. Like, you're doing really important work of bringing people together, getting people to understand the complex history, and allowing people to connect with you online and really hear from your heart. So I'm glad that you saw people drop off and not follow you, and then it was like you have a lot of followers now and a lot of support. I love to hear that.
Yeah.
What I want to get into here, because I will admit, like, this feels like very raw for me this week. I feel like there are some people that have been peers and colleagues and people I've learned from, mentors in the yoga world, who at various times over the last 4 years have really been on this journey of like, we're going to speak up for social justice, the murder of George Floyd, like, we're going to talk about racism, we're going to talk about gender inclusion, like, together we're on this journey. Yes, this all matters. This is all part of yoga and spirituality, and we're all connected. And then I feel like it's been a bit of a slap in the face, especially this week. It feels like I've gotten the message from different people to say, I don't have the capacity to care about everything.
Yeah. It's this feeling of separateness, I think, Shannon. This is what, like, my latest reflections have been about, around this idea that in so many of the practices that we've learned and the books that we've read in personal development, it really focuses so much on ourselves as individuals and how separate we are. And so much of it is about self love and self care and self compassion and self forgiveness. And I'm all for that. And for years, I taught that to mothers, and I do still believe that you have to take care of yourself. But I think because the focus was so much on the self, we kind of lost that feeling of community and the good of the collective versus the individual. And these people who are saying, I don't have the capacity to care about all that there is, are purely in their separateness or in their perceived separateness, because none of us are separate. It's impossible, and it's impossible to believe that your existence or somebody else's existence does not affect yours. Even nature is affected by us. We get our oxygen from nature and we give it back the carbon dioxide. There's always a relationship between us and nature and the universe and earth and the world and people. So to believe and to think that because it's happening on the other side of the globe and there are problems where I can't focus on both of these, is maybe it's part of protecting ourselves. Because if I open myself to feeling all of these feelings, I'll be in so much pain, because so many people around the world are treated inhumanely. It's not just Palestine. Palestine has been this like door that's been opening up for everyone to see now, specifically the injustice that's happening in Palestine, but it's shedding light on all of the oppressed people of the world and all of the people who have been looked down upon over the years and the centuries, really. And then to see our teachers, the ones that we've been, we look up to, and I used to use all of their quotes in my presentations and my trainings. And, I don't want to even say names right now, but like authors and writers and spiritual teachers, it was just, I thought that because they're so amazing in my mind and they've taught me so much, that they must genuinely be good people on the inside. And I'm not saying they're bad people on the inside right now. I'm just saying that I never thought to ask them, hey, if a genocide happens, regardless of where, how are you going to be before deciding that, yeah, I'm going to read your book, I'm going to follow you, I'm going to become your client, I'm going to like be one of your biggest fans. It never crossed my mind to ask that because I assumed that I had the answer. Like, of course, this guy would say something. Of course, that guy, this woman. And it's been exactly like you said, like slaps on the face, uh, especially for people like us. Maybe for others, celebrities have been disappointing to them, singers and actors. For me, that hasn't hit as hard because I never looked up to these people. I find them entertaining or boring or whatever. I like feel completely indifferent towards them, although I feel like everyone now who has a platform must speak up. But I wasn't as hurt by their silence as much as I am hurt by the silence of our teachers. And I'm saying like my teachers, not just like authors that I read, my teachers that I've been working with for 2, 3 years, paying them thousands of dollars, who haven't said a word. But I also feel, Shannon, that I spent so much time out of these 7 months placing my anger on in the wrong place. Like there's so much rage and anger inside, and I feel like I found this one of the things to be angry about, and I've been holding on to it. And I've been reflecting specifically over the past 2 weeks that it can't be that now, because I see who they are, that everything they've taught me is meaningless. Like, you know what? I'm just going to throw their books and burn them, and I'm never going to use what they taught me. That's how I felt initially. You know, I was like so angry and irrational. But now, as I look back, I'm like, you know what? There are certain things that they've truly helped me with. I can't deny that now, just because I'm disappointed in how they are being now. But what it teaches me is how do I move forward from here? How do I move forward as a coach for my people and for my clients and for my friends and my community? And also, how do I move forward in finding the next teachers? Because I love learning, I love reading, I love all of these things, and I'm being so careful. Like, I'm so careful with anything that I hear. I would say 80% of my time is spent listening to politics right now, what's happening in the world with my people. And then 20% is Dr. Gabor Mate and Teal Swan. I just feel safe in their hands. I feel like I know them. They've shown us who they are. And I'm not worried that they're gonna, I don't know, break my mind the same way all the others have. So there are a lot of lessons as well. I'm trying to find the silver lining in all of this. And maybe that's one of them, that we learned who to trust and who not to trust in the future.
This is really making me think like about the anger, um, because I've been sitting with like grief and anger, especially this week. And I appreciate you saying we don't have to throw out everything that we've learned from
It might be
someone.
displaced anger, like,
Yeah,
yes, we're angry, but am I really angry at my coach, or am I angry at Israel for doing what it's doing? Like,
right.
what am I angry about really? And where should my energy go? Like, anger is a good thing when it's helping you move forward, right? Or maybe that's one of the things that I learned from my coaches, who taught me not to be so angry, not to be so, to allow emotions to run your life. But sometimes you do need the anger and the rage to scream, to fight, to protest. I mean, look at all these students. If we didn't have anger, they'd be sitting at home feeling sad and crying. We can't just have grief. We can't just have sadness. We have to have all of the emotions, and we need them all. But being angry at people for not speaking up, it feels like energy that's wasted completely. So we need to be angry towards something that we can actually do something about, and that's more meaningful, really.
This is so helpful. My good friend Ray, when I was having a day of anger, like what was back when there was snow in Canada, she was like, "Why don't you try and do something?" She said, "I'm going down to the river today and I'm going to throw rocks." And I was like, "Well, I can't find any because of all the snow. So I'm going to go throw snowballs." And we did this like somatic practice to really be in the anger
Oh,
and feel it. And
yeah,
that was super helpful.
yeah, that must have felt good. Yeah,
Gosh, did it ever?
I feel like breaking things sometimes. When I'm working out, I work out at home with my coach on Zoom with a group of ladies and with my amazing coach. And it's always strength training. So it's like the kettlebells and they're heavy. And I always imagine like, what if I just threw this? Just
Right.
threw it at the wall, threw it in the, like, there's a bar right in front of me with glass. Like, I just want to throw something, break something. So you found a better way of doing it. Maybe because I'm in Dubai, I don't have the snow, but I can go throw sand or dirt in the ocean and
Yeah.
maybe feel a little bit
Try
better.
it. Try it.
Yeah.
And so this brings up a good point when you were talking about like we never had the chance to ask spiritual teachers, uh, how would you react in a genocide? And I I find it very important now. There's no way that I would sign up for a coaching program, a yoga teacher training, anything, a
Yeah.
collaboration. I'm very careful now. I really go through, I mean, I feel like we've gone through a lot of things here on the podcast. Like, I used to scroll for like, is this person giving diet advice? We're very anti-diet over here, like, or different values that I have. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on like how do we make sure that someone's on the same page?
I'm not only am I careful with who I choose to like become my coach or to whatever. I am so careful these days with even liking a post. Like I'll see parenting advice and I read it usually like who I was in the past was, oh wow, I love this piece of advice, like, and move on with my life. And now I do that and I scroll back up and I remove my like and then I go check out this person's profile and I scroll and I want to see, have you talked about this? You're a parenting coach for mothers. You should be someone who truly cares about children and childhood. Have you said anything? And if they haven't, then I'm not liking this post. And there's good advice that comes from bad people, and that just I'm not going to support that or support their platform. So that's how careful I am these days with who I give my love and my attention and my admiration to. And now when it comes to coaches and teachers, I told you a story of my cousin who's going on a yoga teacher training in Bali in August. And she was talking to the three different options that she had in Bali. And she said that during the call, straight out, she asked them, and she said, listen, I'm coming on this yoga training and I'm going to be, in a very vulnerable place. And I need to feel that I have a safe space and safe people around me. I am Palestinian and I need to understand where you stand on what's been happening. And she said within a millisecond, you can read people's faces and then one person starts, well, both sides and for sure this is not going to be the person for me. And I told her, I'm so proud of you. Like, I'm not so direct. I don't know how I would ask it. I would probably type it instead of ask it face to face. But I think it's so important. I mean, the same way you think about when you're choosing a school for your kids, you're trying not to send them to a school that's going to be teaching them things that you don't want them to learn or to, although we all end up doing that, unfortunately, until we decide to stop schooling them or homeschool them. But for the most part, you're very careful with who your kid is surrounded by because they're growing and our brains and our spirits are the same, and who's gonna come into contact with that very sacred space inside of us we need to be careful about that. The same way we're careful about, like, what kind of food we eat. What are we listening to? And I'm not even talking about necessarily coaches that you're going to hire to help you. Even videos, I watch so many videos on YouTube, and I never stop to think, who's this person that I'm listening to? Like, what are they really like? I just, yeah, that's a nice idea. I'll listen to it and move on. But now I'm much more selective. And as a yoga teacher, you're a coach for yoga coaches, right? So you're a lot like me. I'm a coach for coaches. When we start thinking about, so how can I show my future clients and my community where I stand on my values? One of the lessons that I felt that I hadn't learned until this whole Palestine thing restarted since October is that I thought that I didn't need to show so much of myself online, or I was so niched down and I want to talk about this, and they don't need to know about other parts of my life, and they don't need to know my values or my principles. That's not the point. I'm teaching them how to grow their following online. Who cares how many kids I have, and now I realize, no, of course that's what matters. And I think this is the future. The future is you're not following just for the advice. You're following the person, their the personal brand, of course, with all of the marketing, but the values of this person, and it needs to shine through. So for me, I hope that the next coach that I have, I wouldn't have to ask that question. It would be so obvious that I don't have to ask it. And I'd like to become that type of coach too. Like, yeah, rest assured, I got you. I will understand, and arms wide open to all of humanity, really.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. And it really makes me think when you said that your cousin was in this vulnerable place. We're all in that vulnerable place when we start learning from a mentor or we go to a yoga teacher training. There's an immediate power dynamic there. A lot of the time we search this out, like when you said, like you were having a tough time, so many people are searching out yoga or some type of spiritual practice when they are already in a
Yeah.
vulnerable place. And so it is important that we are getting that from someone who has values that are aligned with us. I'm popping in here for a moment, connected yoga teachers, to tell you about OfferingTree. So yes, this is a company and a software that sponsors the podcast and that brings it to your ears today. And I'm super grateful for them for that part of things. But I also use OfferingTree myself in my own business. And I tell every yoga teacher about OfferingTree. I actually talked to 3 yoga teachers this week and told them about OfferingTree. It just comes up in conversation because it's very reasonably priced, and it also makes everything so automatic. So if you are hosting a yoga series or a workshop or a training, I would highly recommend taking the bookings through OfferingTree. So it automates Zoom links if you're doing anything online. It calculates time zones. No one wants to deal with time zone issues. And it sends out reminder emails and texts all automatically. Oh, also, the waiver form is on there. You can make your own custom waiver form, and people, when they sign up, they sign it. It's been almost 20 years. That's wild to think, of being a yoga teacher. And in that time, I've worked in many different studios, and I've managed 3 studios. And in those studios, we had many different software options. And we worked with many things to create websites and take payments and book people into classes. And I mean, right down to like a little card that we would write on, all the way up to a really complicated software. And I have to say, OfferingTree is the most user-friendly software that I know of. And like I said, it's the most reasonably priced as well. And because you are a podcast listener, if you're already thinking about signing up for OfferingTree, make sure to use the discount code. That's over at OfferingTree.com/Shannon. Alrighty, let's get back into our chat today with Muna. Now, I have to ask here, because I have learned the hard way. And I talk about this on the podcast. It had to do with doing a land acknowledgement here in Canada. We live on stolen land. And it's really important that we acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, when someone told me that first, I wasn't ready to hear it.
Yeah.
And we learn in community. Now, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are of, like, what about when someone says something online and we're like, that's not feeling right, but maybe we have the learning to do.
Yeah. Since the beginning of this whole thing, we've been talking about how amazing it's been that so many people are waking up and finally seeing the truth. And wow, there's this great big awakening. And I think a part of me felt that, like, yeah, look at them, they're waking up. I've already been like awake. Don't worry about me. I'm like way up there. And this whole experience has really, really humbled me to realize that I do have certain biases and that I do have um, triggers in which you say that, and I can no longer listen past that. At the same time, there are certain things about the occupation, the Israeli occupation of the Palestinians, where we know from just one sentence when somebody comes and says, oh, two-state solution, or says, but the Israelis have the right to defend themselves. We have, like, we no longer have the patience that we had maybe in the past to explain and to talk through that, to explain things to people. And when they start, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that, Shannon. I feel like I have so many more questions than answers these days. Does that make sense to you at all?
Yes. I love
Like
that.
deep, like I don't know anymore. I have so many parts of myself that almost feel like they're in contradiction, and I'm trying to integrate them. So I have this voice that's telling me, yeah, but we need to hear them out, and the other voice that says, but we've heard them out for long enough. And finally, there's a feeling amongst us Palestinians, especially those of us who are speaking up online, who feel that we've been so censored for so long, not because people censored us, it was self-censorship. Like, I had my followers for, I don't know, 8 years, 7 years. And maybe I've mentioned that I'm Palestinian once or twice. It wasn't part, although it's such a deep part of my identity. But we just thought that that's not the focus, that's not important. But it really is. So we feel right now that, you know what? Things are so bad. I don't care about how people receive this. I don't care if I don't sound politically correct according to the political correctness that does not make sense. It's the same political correctness of saying a Zionist is a horrible person, and then someone calling you an anti-Semite for that. Like, oh, I can't say that because it's politically incorrect. Well, you know what? I don't want to be politically correct anymore. That's like the other side of me, maybe the bigger side of me these days that's been showing up more than the kind and empathetic side, really.
I appreciate you saying this. It was a yoga teacher who reached out to me and said, oh my gosh, I don't tell anyone I'm Palestinian. This never comes up because I don't bring it up, and I'm actually afraid to. And now I listen to this podcast. We had done a podcast with a Palestinian yoga teacher, and she said, I feel so seen and heard all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Like, and to realize someone is sitting, like, really, like you were, like, hiding who you are.
Yeah.
Because it's dangerous.
It wasn't necessarily like hiding, consciously hiding. Because I've lived my life being a Palestinian, and traveled and went to school in the States, and I see how they look at us. So it was more of an avoidance of the headache of explaining things, the avoidance of, I know they're gonna like stereotype me into something that I'm not. So I might as well just not mention it. Let's not do that. So it wasn't like really like, I'm afraid, what are they gonna do to me? Thankfully, never lived in a place where I felt my physical safety was like an issue. But it was just like, I don't need to talk about that right now. But now that we've started talking, there's no point telling half the story, or like gently being careful with all of our words, and being careful not to hurt the smallest minorities in Israel, from the Israeli side, who feel for us. At the beginning, when I started posting, my husband and some of my close friends said, Muna, you need to be careful because you don't want to alienate the people who are supporting us. So when you
Right.
show all of this anger, you're alienating certain people. And I'm like, you know what? We are in such a like traumatic time right now, and I don't think that people should be judging how angry we are. The people who are standing by our side, and I've seen this literally from my followers right now, who tell me, I was not offended by that, you're right, America has done this to your people, because they understand I'm not talking about you, I'm not talking about the people, I'm talking about the governments. So I don't care about alienating the government and some of these people who think that I have to be so thankful that they finally mentioned Palestine after saying Israel, and I have to like, wow, you've acknowledged. You know what? I don't care. I don't care. I'll alienate you all I want. So this is the attitude right now of the Palestinians online of, forget about like self-censorship. Instagram is doing enough of that censorship, but we are no longer doing it. We're just no longer going to be quiet about this.
Yes. And I think, okay, here's the thing that I find really interesting is when it was like, Black Lives Matter, we're taken to the streets, white people are going to fight racism right alongside you. It's up to white people to put themselves in front of here. I feel like it's the same thing that right now, me as a white person living in Canada with a lot of privilege right now, with a small podcast, that yoga teachers listen to.
Yeah.
I have enough privilege that, and let's say it's not even here on the podcast. Like, I'm really excited that we get to amplify your voice and tell people about your Instagram and they can follow you. But in my private messages, or even in a phone call this week where my cousin called me, she's like, okay, explain to me what is happening, because it's hitting the universities in Canada, which is really
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
What are these kids asking for? Why are they sleeping in tents? And she called me because she was like, I know
Oh,
Shannon's going to talk about this. I
this makes me
know.
so happy. It makes me want to cry,
I
honestly.
know, because she saw it on the news and
Yeah.
she even said to her daughter, I know we're going for a walk, but I got to call Shannon right now because I don't understand this. And so
Yeah.
I know, same thing. And that is the difference that people with privilege outside of, like, of course you're feeling like that. I'm feeling
Yeah.
like one major thing that I feel over and over again every single day is, what if these were my children? What if
Yeah.
I lived where these people live? How would
I
I
know.
want other people from around the world speaking up?
Yeah.
Not seeing that. And like you said, I work in yoga spaces, health and wellness, and also pelvic health. This all relates. Like,
Yeah.
it's all
I
connected.
can't, I can't think of any industry where what's happening right now does not relate, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, this is such a, I think it's so surreal and so dystopian that we are seeing this live on our phones. My dad is physically in Palestine. My aunts, my cousins are there right now. And we have to continue living our lives and taking our kids to school, and, you know, cooking and doing grocery shopping, and some people going to work and all of these things. Like, how can this be happening at the same time. It's like every morning I wake up and for a millisecond I forget what's happening and then I remember, and there's this feeling of like such heaviness in my chest, imagining exactly what you just said. Somebody asked me the other day, like, what keeps you going? And I said exactly what you just said. Like, I imagine if I'm a mom there, how would I want people on the outside to be? Would I want them to say, hey, you know what? Life goes on. That, yeah, guys, please go ahead. We're fine here. No, that's not what I would want. And that's why I feel like we are in such a state of emergency that affects everyone in the world. Right now, it doesn't look like it. It looks like it's happening in this small little country called Palestine, which a lot of people won't even believe it even exists. But the fact that they're getting away with this in front of everyone's eyes in broad daylight, they're not even trying to hide it anymore, should really scare everyone. The fact that that they sent a letter to the International Criminal Court threatening them if they go ahead with any arrests of any Israeli officials. They're threatening them and their families and their staff. Like, what are we seeing right here? It's insane. And if you think that, oh, that's happening there and the United States will never do this to my country, Israel is so far away. Why would Israel even be interested in my country? Well, I don't know. And they might be, but they're also setting a precedent for other possible tyrants that could come up. Anyone could now say, you know what, at least it's not as bad as Gaza. It's not as bad as what Netanyahu did. This is now becoming like the precedent that we're setting. And that's why there's this feeling of we can't stop now. Now that we've started, now that we're here, we're not backing down anymore. Going back to how things were. How things were horrible for 76 years. And we fought it for so long. And at some point, I think we felt like it's almost hopeless, or at least not in our lifetimes. And then this happened. And this I don't know, reignited such a fire inside of all of us. And I feel like for the first time, the whole world caught that, like everyone from around the world. I cannot imagine a single country in the world that's not aware of what's going on. It's almost like when COVID happened. I remember I used to drive in the streets and look at people and think, wow, this is one of the few things in life that we all know. Like, I know you know about COVID. And now I know this is the case for Palestine and what's happening there. So our anger is leading to something. Our posting, our being politically incorrect according to them and their rules that they make, it's leading to something. That's the hope that I have.
It is. And also, I want to say, like, watching people that I know in the health and wellness space try so hard to not post political things.
Yeah.
I see how it's very difficult on them.
Yeah.
Like it's like trying to suppress like let's say someone's watching it and they're like, this is horrible. What's happening? I feel for these children, these people, these innocent civilians. I can't believe this is happening. They're having all this. And then they're like, oh, but now I'm on my 9 to 5 time where I don't talk about it at all. It's a weird place that I see people fighting. And I was there, like, and when this first, I remember having this conversation with some friends. Like, I was like, I think I need to say something, but I've only been studying about Palestine for 3 years and not like at school or something, just because I heard a mentor of mine say free Palestine. And I was so ignorant 3 years ago and was like, I don't even know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And then I remember thinking, do I like exactly what you said? Like, I'm niche down, and then it just got to the point where I was like, I would be a fake. I would be lying to people if I don't talk about this.
That's incredible. I'm so glad that you exist and that you've been doing that and that you've been changing the minds of people and opening the hearts of people. And I feel like from your side, it's understandable that you were a bit intimidated about posting, and I completely get that. What's funny is that I, a Palestinian who supposedly knows so much about Palestine, was also so intimidated. Intimidated because I thought in the beginning the fact that we Palestinians get so emotional when we're talking, while so many of the Israelis are so well spoken and they have all of their notes and everything that they're saying is 100% well articulated, that used to intimidate me. And I realized that this is part of the brainwashing and this is part of their propaganda and part of, when you start posting and you receive a million messages saying exactly the same thing because they're all parroting the same thing. That's when I realized that's how they want us to feel. They want us to feel, oh, you don't know enough. Even as a Palestinian, it's complicated. For me, I didn't think it was complicated. I thought it was complicated to explain to people. Turns out it's not complicated to explain. It's not complicated to understand if you're willing to. So what I would say to someone like the person that you mentioned, like, okay, I'm feeling all of this, and then I have my 9 to 5. So let's imagine that this person has their 9 to 5 is their own business online. What I would recommend, and this is my personal opinion, not my business advice, but my personal opinion is you can still do work and talk about Palestine, and they can even both be done at the same time. Like something horrible could have happened in Palestine, and the next day you show up and you say, like, I'm horrified. Like you say, you be who you are. And I think this is what was missing in social media before. At least that's not who I used to be. I used to show up with the exact same look every single time. Everything needs to be perfect. I need to know what I'm saying. I need to, look good. But that's not what people need. So be honest. Say, you know what? I'm so heartbroken. It's devastating. Anyway, what's happening today, what I'm teaching today, my tip for today about something else, but just like don't ignore the elephant in the room. That does not make anyone look good. I feel really bad for the people who have to go to actual jobs if their companies are not creating that sense of support for the employees or for anyone who's feeling all of this pain and heaviness. I can't imagine getting up in the morning and going to work and sitting around for 8 hours around people and not mentioning Palestine or not being allowed to wear my kufiya. I feel like so lucky and privileged that I have these small luxuries, while others don't. But also a part of me feels like, a friend asked me the other day, like, what would you have them do? And I said, okay, let's just imagine this is a movie. This is not real. And we're not talking about just one person, but one person, two, three, four, five, and then all of these people working at all of these companies that are not supporting humanity and justice and who are directly inflicting pain on children, that all of these millions of people get up off their desks and just leave and say, we're not coming back until you stop. Like, that's my dream. It's very dangerous to convince people to do that, and then 5 people do it, and then they get fired and screwed over. And this is why I feel people are scared to do it. I just wish we could organize in such a way where we all say, you know what, we are the masses. The companies that we work for, they pretend like they are everything. But the truth is, they need us. Without us, the employees, they would not be able to achieve what they're achieving. And they make you think you're disposable, but dispensable. Disposable or dispensable? What's the right one?
Disposable.
Disposable, I guess. But yes, maybe you are if somebody else takes your place. But what if everyone starts saying, no, I'm not going to work for a company that supports this? So the company changes or you change, or, you know, like that's my dream. But I know then you have all of the practicalities of life. People need to pay their bills and we need to make money and all of these things. I understand that. And at the same time, desperate times call for desperate measures. And I can't see what more needs to happen before people, like, you know, just like throw their laptop on the floor and just leave, like, I don't know.
I had this exact, I was like, why isn't everyone just saying, like, we can't go on, we can't go to work, we can't go to school, we can't do
Yeah,
anything. And look at the universities. That's what they're saying. They're
exactly.
it's people with, and it's not less to lose. They don't have less to lose. They're like putting their lives on the line and sleeping in tents
Yeah,
around the world now.
yeah.
Um, I
But you know, they
think
don't have children to feed and
right.
probably their bills. But yeah, that does not make it any less their you know, they have their whole future ahead of them. And if they plan on staying in the States, they're getting all of these threats of never getting hired again. And they're putting their academic future on the line for this. So they do have a lot of potential to lose, but maybe not things to lose like right this minute. The
Yeah.
same way someone with 4 kids would say, like, I want to fight, but I have 4 kids to feed.
Yeah.
And so, but then, like, you know, the conversation with my friend kept going on and on. And then I said, well, you have 4 people to feed them. I'm sure you have enough money to feed them from savings. And then they say, well, but the school is very expensive. And I'm like, then take them out of school. Like, the situation is so bad right now. We should tell our schools, our universities, our bosses, our everything, that I'm not spending a penny unless I see you doing the right thing. That's going to be the power of the people. We just
It
need to
really is.
organize.
I wrote to like this company to say, I don't see you saying anything about Palestine, and I generally spend like $300 on like this moisturizer for my skin.
Mhm.
And unless I see you say something, I'm just going to take that $300 and go and like donate it to the people of
Amazing.
Gaza. And like, that's just one. And, you know, the
Yeah,
person who wrote me back on social media is not the owner of the company. And they were
yeah,
like, thank you so much for your compassion. Like, I feel like that person got it. And they're like,
yeah,
maybe also put this in an email.
yeah,
There are small things that we can do. And like you said,
oh,
we're the collective. We're like
yeah,
a big group of people. And um, you know, I think that there's a huge shift right now with the collective. And I think you're right. I think we can ask questions.
yeah.
There's a lot of power. Someone wrote me an email recently and they were talking all about they wanted to share their values and it was powerful. I was like really impressed. Nowhere in that email did they talk about Palestine. So I just wrote back and said, I'd like to know where you stand on Palestine. And they were like, oh my gosh, it's not clear. Oh, I've done 2 posts. And you know what? I could do more. Like they're like, I very much stand with Palestine right now. And I was like, well, I'm just gonna ask.
Because it's become a measure, and again, like, I love that it's become not just about Palestine, because
Hmm.
this has become a measure of what will you stand for and what will you not allow, what will you refuse. You know what I mean? And we, you know, I was listening to Teal Swan this morning, and she said that everything that we do is a vote for the world that we want. So if we accept things, we're voting for them.
Yeah.
And that's going to stay there for the next generation. We're going to become the ancestors who started this or continued this.
Yeah.
And so when we vote for the things we do want, that's the future that we're building. So, like you said, it might feel like it's small things that we're doing here and there, but they do add up. And I think part of the brainwashing and the programming that we've all been under, like the spell of them making us believe like you are actually helpless and without us you're nothing and all of these things, and we believe them. And now we're starting to see that that's not really true. Yeah, we do need you in certain ways, but Remember when COVID happened and we were on lockdown, and the country where I lived was very serious about lockdown. Like, we could not leave the house, I think,
Same.
for, I don't know, 7, 8 months. And then there was like a curfew of 7 p.m. and all of these things. At that time, we learned that we can actually live with a lot less than we thought we could live with.
Yes.
We thought that we are going to miss so many things, and how are we going to live our lives without going out and without buying all of these products and without all of these things. And this was like a training to see, for me at least, to see like, how can I live life with less? And this time around, it's not like there's no lockdown. The government, unfortunately, hasn't done something as drastic as ask us to stay at home or leave work or do any of these things. But just because of the way that I'm feeling, I'm literally doing nothing social, like in terms of going to the mall or going to restaurants, none of these things. Like, the thing that we do with my husband is meet up with a couple of friends, and that's about it, at each other's houses. So we're not going out. The last thing on my mind is shopping or buying whatever. So that gets me to think, like, all of these guys thought that we think that we can't live without them and their products. And here we are. I don't even miss your product. I don't even think about your product.
Yeah.
And I always find that there's a replacement for everything. If anything, you guys are the disposable ones, not us. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So that's just like, we need to just remember and reclaim our own power that they've made us believe we don't have. This is the biggest reminder for me. The biggest lesson right now is I am much more powerful than I thought I was.
Yeah.
And everything that I do will become a vote for the world I want to live in and the world I don't want to live in.
Yeah. What would you tell to the yoga teacher who's been watching this, who has been thinking like, oh my gosh, but also feels like, wow, I chose not to speak up for the last 7 months. And so how would I do that now?
Yeah. I wish I had the perfect answer, like, of exactly how to do it. But what I want to talk about is, every time you recognize something in yourself that you could be doing better, you have a choice of allowing your ego to say, you know what, I haven't said anything yet until now, and it's going to be embarrassing to just come out now and say something, so I won't. And here you go again, living in this ego and in this separateness, because it's your fear about what people are going to think of you, the fact that you didn't post, or the fact that you are going to post, and what are they going to think, that you're focused on. And what I want to invite them to do is to remember, like, the reason that you are feeling what you're feeling but you're not posting about it is because your insides are hurting for what's happening. And that means that thousands of people are feeling the same way. And your voice, and I think for a yoga teacher, I believe, like, you understand how powerful you are and how you can change people's lives and minds. And we no longer have the luxury of saying, well, I only have 100 followers, so I can't post about it. I mean, they're all my friends. That would have been okay if it's a small thing in the world. But at this point, we need every single voice. And it's never, never, never too late. But I really don't know how you would directly go about it. Again, I'm choosing honesty. I would say, like, instead of just suddenly saying something, just come out and say, like, I've been thinking about this. I've been struggling. I've been hesitant about talking about this, but honestly, I haven't been sleeping at night. This is making me sick, and I have to talk about it. And the truth is, if people unfollow you because of that, is that truly a loss? Do you want your clients who pay you money and energy and you know, who are around you to be people who are opposed to you speaking up against a genocide, against the killing of women and children and men and old men and disabled people and embryos. Like, if anyone is offended by you saying that, it's not a loss of them getting out of your life. You'd be doing yourself a favor, honestly. Like, just do it. Be honest. And I know it's easier said than done, but it's going to feel so good when you do it.
That's exactly what I experienced. Like the first time I posted, I was like, "Ooh," like that's what
Yeah.
I was just like, "Of course,
Yeah.
I'm concerned about my friends in Israel, and I'm very concerned also about my Palestinian friends. And you can't tell me I have to silence one of those things."
You know, we feel like what happens online is just online, but being online is somebody taught me this once in some training that I did, that going on how we teach our children about the digital world and whatever. And she said, like, you should teach your children that the internet is not a thing, it's a place that they go. And when they're kids, when they're very young, you don't let them go to the mall alone, do you? So why would you let them go? And I worked with my daughter on that, and that really stuck with me. But I think a lot of people don't realize that there are real people behind these screens. So I would ask this person who feels like I can't speak up, like, if you were walking in a place, in a mall, and you see a mob, a group of men beating women and children, like at the door, what are you going to do? Are you just going to walk by and say, oh, too bad, but I can't, I have to go do my nails now? Of course not. You're gonna do something. That is what is will come out naturally and humanly. So why are we pretending to be different online? If you wouldn't do that in real life, why would you do it online? If you see injustice, if you know that you, and like you said, especially the people who do have that privilege of being white, so other people will listen to them, because that's how the world is, and we know it. My voice got so much more amplified when it was shared by all of the white people versus by the Palestinians. So when you know that you can actually help this woman and this child and this baby, then you should. That's what we're here for. We're here for each other, and this whole idea of the separateness is what's hurting us all. We have to remember that we are connected, and relationships are the most important thing. And how will you be able to live with yourself in the future? Like, imagine, I'm just talking to a random human, like imaginary person who says, I don't want to talk about it because I didn't talk about Black Lives Matter. And so why would I now? I want you to imagine that 40 years from now, your grandson is going to come and sit with you and be like, hey, grandma, why didn't you say anything when the genocide was happening? Well, because I didn't say anything before it, so I thought I shouldn't. But does that make sense? Is this your legacy? Is this what you want to leave your descendants? Is this who you want to be as an ancestor yourself? Because we're all becoming ancestors one day, right? So what we do now matters, and it feels like such a time of awakening for everyone. And you have to choose. And it's hard. I know it's hard. But we have to do hard things, and we can do hard things.
Yeah. And it makes a bigger difference than you know. Like, I have people who reach out to me and say, actually, I'm not safe to post anything because of my job, but I just went to a protest today because I've been watching your stories. Like,
Yeah,
it does make a difference. And
yeah,
it makes me want to vomit a bit that like white people have this bigger reach. Like, that's gross. And that's
it's
the
how it
society
is.
we live in. So use
Yeah,
your privilege. Like, if you've got some more clout, use
exactly.
it.
And I received messages from people in Palestine, people living in the occupied territories, so they have the Israeli passport, who are Palestinians, who, some of their family members have been arrested for liking a post on Instagram, for even consuming content on Instagram, not even liking it. So this one particular lady sent me a message, and she said, I just want you to know that I watch all of your videos. They give me so much hope. I can't like them. I try not to watch them to the end because of this, what could happen, and I have these kids at home and all of these things. And that makes me feel that I have so much privilege myself being outside of there, that I'm hopefully in no physical danger at the moment from being stopped for speaking up. So I think there are different levels of privilege, and we should all use our privilege, however small it might seem, to speak up for the less privileged, or for the people who literally can't speak up. Like, they're on the inside, and if you like, the people who are posting are in Gaza because things are so bad, they're not scared anymore. But the people in Ramallah, the people in Nazareth, the people in Jerusalem, no, they're worried. Even on the phone, when I call them, when I speak to my dad, when I speak to my husband's cousins, like, I start asking questions, and they're like, okay, so what do you have for lunch today? Because they can't talk about it on the phone. So I hang up the phone, and I go back on Instagram, and I need to speak up even louder because I have this privilege that they don't have.
That's really something to think about.
Yeah.
Because and speaking of the collective and like working together, we can look at that and say, well, we're just really lucky here. Like, I hear people say that all the time, and we are really lucky here where I live in Canada. We have a lot of things to be thankful for. And if that can happen in another country where all of a sudden we're worried what we're saying on the phone, or we're worried what we're liking on Instagram, we've seen it happen in other countries. We've seen it happening in the US, in Germany. I
Yeah,
have.
they banned TikTok. Like,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
can do whatever they want.
So it can. And if it's important to us, like, that we have freedom of speech and we are able to speak up for oppressed people, we need to we need to do like you said, just like, okay, here's the day we're all getting up and we're all like,
Yeah, because for now, they're the oppressed people. You never know who the next oppressed people will be if we don't do something to change, literally the course of history. I know it sounds like, whoa, so grand, but
oh
it
no,
is.
it's
It is.
true.
What we allow to happen now is history in the making, and we can choose in which direction we want our humanity to go. I was looking up the quote because I wanted to do a video on, be the change you want to see in the world. And I just wanted to make sure that Gandhi said it and whatever. It turns out he didn't say it. He didn't say it exactly like that. I didn't do the video after all. It's a longer quote, and there's a context to it, and there's a reason why he said it. But if you think about like the main concept here, we've all said, be the change you want to see in the world. You hear teachers saying it, the leaders say it to their employees, you see it on stickers, on cars, and all of these things. But do we actually mean it? Do we actually mean that we want a better world, so we should be the change? Or are we? That's part of the self reflection and about like really the awakening to our own like bad things that we need to change about ourselves, is to realize that, have I been complaining about how the world has been, but really haven't done anything to change it? It's almost like somebody who's complaining about traffic and how people drive, but they're the ones who are cutting people off. And their reasoning is, well, they're cut me off first. Well, be the change that you want to see. So right now we're at a point where I truly feel like now is the time to be that change, to live in that way. And that includes, like how we shop, what we buy, who we give our money to, who we give our attention to, who we work for, what we say, what kind of friendships we keep. I receive messages from people all of the time saying, like, I've lost good friends, but now I realize that they weren't friends after all. Like, these are the changes that we have to be making right now if we want a different future. Because the way things are heading, if we leave them to go the way that they are, it's a very scary destination. And it's no longer like, let the teachers do their thing and we, the normal people, can just live our lives. I feel like everybody needs to get on board to change how things are, the world order, or how it is and who it's controlled by.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for investing so much time and energy in not just talking with us today, but like creating online content, thinking about this, having the filter of knowing like all the things that you learn through your life, like as a parent, as a spiritual teacher, as a coach. Um, it really shines through and it really connects. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy that I met you and that there are people like you in the world. It like gives me so much hope, and I hope to see you one day and like hug you and just say thank you. We really appreciate you and your voice and everything that you're doing and every single person that you're touching. And I believe in the ripple effect of both good and bad, and you have a ripple effect of just all goodness. So thank you so much for that.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Muna, for all that you're doing right now in this moment, and also for taking the time to talk with our connected yoga teachers about collective care and how we can get things really mixed up when we just look at self-care only and we're not looking at collective care. I appreciate the work that you're doing beyond what I can even express here in the podcast. I'm just super grateful when I click on a video of yours and you're talking openly and honestly about what it feels like to take a look around at the coaching industry, the self-help industry, health and wellness spaces, and to really take note of where we've gotten to in this moment. Connected yoga teachers, if you want to share a comment on this episode, we would love to hear from you. You can do that over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/376. And then you can also leave a review for the podcast. Tell us your thoughts on today's episode. Tell us your thoughts on the entire podcast as a series up to this point. We love to hear from you. If you want to get together in person, there are a couple of ways to do that in July. So on July the 15th, in the Pelvic Health Professionals membership, we are going to be talking about anxiety and sleep issues in perimenopause. Anne-Marie McQueen is coming in to talk with us about that. I cannot wait. It's thanks to some questions from our pelvic health professional members who said, hey, we're dealing with anxiety and sleep issues around that perimenopausal time or within menopause, and they wanted some answers. And so we're doing that call July the 15th. If you've missed that call live, not to worry. We have recordings of all of our calls in Pelvic Health Professionals. And then July the 29th, we are doing something. It's either a celebration call. We're talking about who's taking over Pelvic Health Professionals and how that's all working. And kind of, I don't know if I want to say worst case scenario, but plan B is if that doesn't work out, then Pelvic Health Professionals is closing, and we'll still be talking about different ways of supporting each other no matter what, and working and learning collaboratively. So if you're interested in checking this out, visit pelvichealthprofessionals.com to join. You can jump in and learn from pelvic health experts from around the world. In the next episode coming out, we're talking to Mary Flaherty. She's coming back on the podcast, this time to talk to us about santosha, which translates into contentment. This is part of the teachings of yoga, and we know this, if we've learned anything about yoga, that yoga can help us to find more contentment. And what I really love about this conversation with Mary is that she gets into the science of this. She's written a book on this, and we'll be doing a book draw as well. So if you are interested in finding some contentment or santosha, make sure to have a listen to our next episode. Thank you to our amazing team over here, Suzanne, Crunch, and Sinead, for all the work you do to bring the podcast to our listeners. And thank you, dear listener, for being here. It means so much that you're here right until the end of the episode. Your time is very valuable. I know you're busy. And it means a lot that you've taken the time to hang out here and to learn together today. As usual, I am closing out the episode with a question. What will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?